Welcome back then folks to the second build of day 2 in Special Projects pack number 19, and this time we've got another bit of a kind of a Frankenstein build, both in terms of its livery and the build itself, because for those who are clued up on their Ferrari F430 race cars, this isn't really a thing. As far as I can tell, this is a livery from an F430 race car, but not a Scuderia version race car. So it's immediately a fictional build, if you will, rather than a replica, but it's more like an inspired by kind of build. And in terms of the tune itself, I wanted to do two things with this one. I wanted to test a little personal, not really theory, but just kind of more of a query, I guess, which was, what if I essentially built kind of a Scuderia version of the GT2 spec F430, which I did, I think it was last time, in the previous pack. I think it might have even been the first build in pack number 19, which was for the F430. But what happens if you just put essentially that same thing straight onto a Scuderia? What difference would it make? Would it immediately be automatically better, even with a similar level of spec? But also secondarily, because of course people have asked for a Scuderia-based racing build, it's an obvious thing to request, so this is to go alongside the F430. Spoiler alert, it is better, even with the same specs. In fact, with roughly the same horsepower and weight, and with a lot of the same stuff in terms of like aero and that kind of thing, it's higher on points anyway. It's, I want to say, I think about 20 or so points higher, so immediately they certainly favour the car. I think some of that's probably the extra aero advantage which the Scuderia has. I believe it has a natural advantage over the standard F430 on downforce, if I recall correctly, so that of course will make a difference. As far as the livery, of course, much like with the Corvette from earlier in the week, there's so many different liveries you could go for. There's absolutely no reason why you have to go for this one. I just chose it purely on the aesthetic side of things. I think it's a great looking colour scheme and I just love the way it looks. It's a GTC EVO, and just like with the other car, I am using, call me a noob or whatever, Forza as a reference. I like the numbers that they're working with in Forza Motorsport 4, for example. So that's what we're doing again. So 502, 503-ish horsepower. In the case of this car, it comes with that as standard, so that's great. And in terms of the weight, 1,195 kilos. And I'm also taking it out to Catalonia, which is a great way to compare it to the F430. And of course, we'll get to that in a second. Now, as far as the actual build, there's not actually a huge amount that you need to do to the car. And as you can see, could be quite a useful one, given that it's barely 700 points. That obviously will always change, because with updates the points are all over the place, but still, that's potentially quite good, especially on racing tyres, and you could easily get it below that just by adjusting the downforce a bit. So, as far as the parts, if we jump to the ultimate section first, you don't need to worry about any of that cancelling out other stuff, at least for this particular version of this build. You want your stage 1 weight, of course. Sports hards are fitted anyway, so you don't need to do that. As far as the club sports section, stage 2 weight, the power restrictor and ballast. For the semi-racing stuff, again, pretty minimal, the limited slip diff, not even the ECU on this occasion, and it's not the only time where something which I would have usually fitted, I haven't, because the next one is probably more surprising. We'll get there in a second. The increased body rigidity has been applied for this one. You could technically go for the stage 3 weight. I've actually opted not to, because we're already at the point where you can easily get it to the right level, so there's no real need to take it even further unless you want to really change the amount of ballast that you've got and totally change where the weight shift is in the car, so more over the front end or the back end. Spoiler alert again, you don't need to do that at all, because this is wonderful through corners in my opinion. I love the way this car performs. So, like I said, the rigidity is done. For the racing stuff, this is the weird one, because you know me, if you followed Special Projects, even if it's just for the look and the sound, I do usually like to fit the race exhaust for a racing replica. And you could, if you want to, I certainly wouldn't hold it against you, but I've opted not to because the power is just already so spot on pretty much to what you would want. I didn't want to mess that up and then have to restrict the engine just for the sake of the sound. As it happens, a Scuderia sounds great anyway, so it's not like you've really lost that much, so I'll leave it down to you. As far as the brakes, I've gone for the slotted discs on this occasion, with the racing pads, the suspension, clutch and flywheel, the transmission as well, and of course the racing hard tyres. For the extreme section, nothing there, and of course, as we already saw for the ultimate section, nothing there either. So aside from buying the car in the first place, it's actually not that expensive of a build to do. So once you've slapped your livery on there and you've got all the parts you need, now let's jump over to what we're actually going to do with them. So if you put this side by side with the other F430, you will notice a few differences, but there's probably more similarity than difference. So First of all, for suspension, 70mm on the front for ride height, 100 on the rear, which sounds like a massive difference, but as you can see, it really isn't. It's basically even when it actually turns out. We've got 5 on anti-roll, 35 and 40 for the dampers, 3.45 on the springs, so on the front, of course, that's fairly high, 3 degrees of camber. As far as towed out, 0.5 on the front, and in 0.20 on the rear. As far as the diff, surprisingly, you don't really have to get in there and go crazy with the diff. I personally find what it essentially comes with of 10, 20, and 30. If I recall, I think that's roughly what it came with. I might have made a slight change, but that works really well. The car seems to just eat that up in terms of how well it works with the diff. As far as the transmission, we've got 300 kilometers an hour for the auto settings, so only up around 190-ish miles an hour. Again, for most tracks, that's probably going to be good enough, especially at the 700-point level. You could extend it if you need to, though. 75 kilos of ballast. I've put that 32% toward the front, because once again, I'm pretty sure, if memory serves, like with that other F430, I am using Forza as the weight reference as well, in terms of the distribution, so a 45-55. And then as far as the restriction, there is none of that applied because you don't need it. And for the downforce, like I said earlier on, this is where the changes could easily put you into below 700 points. So for example, if you put this down to 245, I think, then bam, straight away, you're right under 700 points easily. So I'll leave that down to you if you do want to make it more useful, maybe for certain events online or whatever. And then over here, of course, what very, very few things we did fit are showcased. So with all of that done and out of the way, now let's jump out to, as I said, Catalonia to see how it actually compares to that other F430. Well, I already kind of spoiled it earlier on by saying that I personally find it to be definitely a better car. The other F430 is already really nice to use, at least for me, and I know there are a ton of F430 fans in the game. This one is leagues ahead. The point level is higher, but it actually justifies it, which goes to show just how much of an improvement the Scuderia is, given that we're working with the same power, the same weight, and a lot of the same kind of parts. And speaking to how quick it is, this is actually quicker than the Jota GT1 Diablo racing build, which I did, which if I recall is a significantly more powerful car. Definitely one of my favourites from this time around in special projects. If you've got a Scuderia or if you want to buy a bonus one to do this with, I hope you enjoy it. If you were hoping for a Scuderia build alongside the F430, then you are definitely going to enjoy this. Check out the rest of the builds for the week, as well as the ones which we've already done, and for now, thanks for watching.